lot of speakers over the years, and I've never heard someone articulate a pro-love, pro-life message like Stephanie Gray. Stephanie Gray is a seasoned international speaker who began presenting at the age of 18. She's given over 800 pro-life presentations across the globe. In 2017, Stephanie was a presenter for the series Talks at Google, speaking on abortion at the Google headquarters in Mountain View, California. Much of Stephanie's media experience was generated when she spent 12 years as executive director and co-founder of the Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform, a ministry that took her to Alberta and Ontario. In 2014, she returned to her home province of British Columbia and now speaks on behalf of her ministry, Love Unleashes Life. Please welcome Stephanie Gray.
Well, as the only Canadian on this stage, since my people are known for apologizing, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for bringing the cold. Edward Everett Hale once said, "I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do." When we think of the over 13,000 children who have been dismembered and decapitated and disemboweled, we can be tempted to think, I am only one. I cannot do everything. But instead, I want us to leave here today believing in the power of our one. That the 13,000 children that were killed last year do not have to be killed in the same quantity this year. That we can make there be 13,000 children that are lovingly adopted or welcomed into a home by their mother who is supported by a community like this. How can we use the power of our one to persuade the women in crisis and the people influencing her to choose life rather than end life? I want to briefly talk about using our power of our one in a way in which we can win the argument as well as win the person. With over 2,000 people here today, if we all leave with the conviction that we will intentionally seek out 10 people to engage in a discussion on abortion, that's over 20,000 people we will reach, which is more than the number of women who may be tempted to have abortions this year, which means we can reach them and we can reach the people around them. I want us to leave with the conviction that we will use the power of our one to go out and intentionally seek out 10 people and begin with this question. What do you think about abortion? And when you ask someone that question, unfortunately, the vast majority will respond, I think sometimes it's okay. And when they say that, I want you to ask why. Under what circumstances do they think it's okay? And they're very likely going to tell you about the crisis the woman will find herself in. It's okay in reasons of poverty. It's okay if she's pregnant from rape. It's okay if she's really young. It's okay if she has no support. And when they say something like that, I want you to pause and I want you to listen for what wasn't verbalized. And what wasn't verbalized but has been communicated to you in that context is what they're saying is to be pregnant and poor will be hard. To be pregnant from rape will be hard. To be pregnant and young will be hard. And when we can hear what was not verbalized, we can validate that which needs to be validated. So our first response can be, I agree. To be pregnant and poor would be hard. To be pregnant in any of those crises would be hard. You're right. That's tough. And then we can ask them, imagine someone is pregnant and not in those circumstances, but after birth, they become poor. Or after birth, they lose the support that they once had. And then we ask, would we ever kill a born child because the circumstances of the mother are hard? And they will say no. So then we ask, why then may we kill the preborn child because the circumstances for the mother are hard? And they're likely going to say, because the preborn is a fetus, not a child. And when they say that, what we realize is they don't consider the child in the womb to be equal to the child outside the womb. They consider the child in the womb to be inferior. And so it's the job of you and me to be the hands, the feet, and the voices of the child in the womb, to convey that that baby is equal to the child who is born. And so the next question we can ask is this: do you believe in human rights? And when we ask someone if they believe in human rights, having asked many, I can tell you what they'll say back. They will say yes. So then we ask, what about the preborn human's rights? And they're going to say the preborn isn't a human. So then we ask, what are the parents of the preborn? If the pregnant woman is human, if her partner is human, wouldn't it follow the offspring must be human? Now they're going to say, well, wait a minute. Even if technically it's human, it's not alive. So we just ask another question. If the child isn't alive, why the need for an abortion? If nothing is living, why intervene? Or is the child growing? Is the one cell growing into 2 and 4 and 8 and multiplying? And if yes, then by her growth, wouldn't she be living? If her parents are human, shouldn't she be human? And if you believe in human rights, then what we know to be a growing, living human should have the same human rights as you or me. In my experience, it's not just a matter of the head. It's often a matter of the heart. I have used a simple back and forth dialogue that I just gave to you and in more detail with many people, and while some are convinced, others are not. And it's in those cases where I've begun to see the problem isn't always up here, it's sometimes down here. I was once asked during Q&A from a student, what about rape? And I said, I agree rape is a horrible injustice for which there are no words. We need to help the victims of sexual assault. And then I asked her, is it fair to give the death penalty to the innocent child? She wasn't convinced, and I gave her more details and more information, and nothing was getting through to her. And when we spoke one-on-one afterwards, I told her that I had a friend who'd been sexually assaulted. And as I journeyed with my friend to healing, what I came to see is that whether someone gets pregnant or not from sexual assault, they have been traumatized, and an abortion is not going to take that trauma away. And the girl looked at me with a deep sadness in her eyes, and she said, yeah, 10 years and counting. And I looked at her and I said, I am so sorry for your suffering. And the course of our conversation changed in that one moment. I went from trying to convince her abortion was wrong in cases of rape as much as my position was valid. And from there, I moved to trying to understand how she was doing and whether I could offer her help. Whether the person in her life who had hurt her was still in her life, whether she needed more counseling. And I remembered in that moment what my friends at Justice for All had said. When someone asks about rape, they're not asking if the baby is human. They're asking if the pro-lifer is human. Do we care as much for the person before us as we care for the child in the womb? Can we win not just the argument, but can we also win the person? By being still, remembering God is God, and asking the Holy Spirit to work through us to stand with the person in their pain. To remember the words in the prayer of St. Francis where we say, O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be understood as to understand. And when we meet people who are angry, when we meet people who are frustrated, to maybe set aside the logic and hear their story. To ask, where does your passion come from? To ask, do you know anyone who's suffered? Do you know anyone who's been a victim of sexual assault? How are they doing? Or in another occasion, an angry person was once yelling and swearing at me, and when there was one moment of pause for me to say something back, I very gently looked at him and said, Noah, what does someone who thinks like you want someone who thinks like me to understand? And when we can know how to ask those open-ended questions, we invite the person to tell us their story and to stand with them in their pain. To apologize or express sympathy when we hear of suffering. To affirm their dignity. To acknowledge that injustice should never have happened to them. And to tell stories of people we know or perhaps ourselves who have been hurt and wounded. And then tell the story of God's redemption and God's transformation in our lives. The power of our one is a mighty force when we're not just one individual, but one community, reaching a community with a message that reaches the mind as well as the heart. A friend of mine once took the pro-life message to the streets. She had an image of a victim of abortion, which, while very controversial, I would say simply this: it's a tool like any tool. It can be used well or it can be used poorly. The more powerful the tool, the more skilled the user must be. And my friend Kiana knew the power of her tool and was a very skilled user. And when she brought that victim of abortion to the public square, a man and woman walked past, and she overheard the man say to the woman, "That will happen to our child on Thursday." My friend felt the conviction of the Holy Spirit, handed her sign over to a colleague, and walked towards the couple as they walked away and said, "Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear what you just said. Is there any way I can help you?" And the woman said to her, "What you showed was very effective." And in that moment, Kiana knew she had won the argument, but she knew she also needed to win the person. And so she said, "What is motivating you to abort?" And the woman said, "I am homeless, and I am a drug addict, and I have no support." And Kiana looked at her and said, "I will support you. I will help you with what you need." And she exchanged contact information and began to reach out to her immediately, so that 1 week later, Kiana joined that woman, not at the abortion clinic, but at the doctor's office, where she saw on the ultrasound screen and heard the heartbeat of that little baby. And Kiana journeyed with that mom through the pregnancy and beyond, offering her support, so that several months later, a baby girl named Ava was born. Kiana used the power of her one. She didn't allow herself to be overwhelmed by numbers so high, thinking, "I can't do everything." But instead she realized, "I can do something. And my inability to do everything gives me the responsibility to do the something that I can do." And so it is my hope and it is my prayer that as we leave here today, we will leave with the conviction of the power of our one, to go from here to reach at least 10 people as a community, who will then reach over 20,000 to save the lives of preborn children. And may we be celebrating over 13,000 birthdays this year. God bless you.